I said, we're going to dive in specifically on one rope. As I shared with you before or any of our other sessions, reading basically is the combination of word recognition and language comprehension, and they have to do both, and they interweave together to create skilled readers. But just so we can deepen our thinking about each one, that's why we're going to kind of go into each one. But please remember that these never are in isolation. They all have to work together. So let's dive into background knowledge. So why background knowledge? So what you know about a topic is a huge influence on your comprehension. And I don't know that we always think about that, but if we try to read a text and we really don't have background knowledge on it, we will really struggle with it, even though we are all in this group very strong readers. And so background knowledge is one of the keys to being able to comprehend text. And the knowledge and the content that we have are fundamental to our success. So I always like just to give a little bit of the research behind it. Don't want to spend too much time on it, but I always like to share that with you. So here's an example. So I'm going to let everybody read this and take a minute to read it. So does anybody know what a sham is? Feel free to unmute if you know what a sham is.
My best guess is it's some sort of instrument.
It is some type of instrument, right? So yeah, so you use a little bit of context clues, to help you out with it. But this is an example that if you don't have any background knowledge about a sham and ancient music, because this is actually an ancient musical instrument, your comprehension of this passage is going to be very limited. So everybody in this room is a great reader, but your background knowledge about a topic influences how well you comprehend what you're reading. And that's why this rope becomes so critical. So background knowledge is important, right? So how do we develop it, right? So what I'm going to do is just share some ideas with you and some things to think about. And then you'll have some time to kind of dig in and collaborate with others. The most important thing that we remember with this topic is that all learning has to connect with previous learning, or schema, which is, the term that we learned when we were in our teacher ed programs. And our schema is everything that we know and experienced in our life. If we don't intentionally make those connections or help students make those connections, we won't have as much learning. I think the other thing that we always want to think about is schema is shaped by our culture. So the more that we know about our students, their background, their interests, how they spend their time, the learning that they've had before, the more that we can make connections. That can also easily be done, through different images. Storytelling is really powerful. Use of media and all things. So there's lots of things that we connect with schema, but we want to be really, really intentional about that. What are some specific strategies that we can use? So I'm going to share a few with you. So one of them is just organizing our learning into units or concepts. And that seems, well, yeah, I knew that, but I want to put that out there, even though it's a little bit obvious, because when we organize our learning into units or concepts, it's easier for us to develop knowledge around that topic or around what it is that we're studying. So I think that's really critical, but it's not just organizing it that way, it's about making the connections. So we're reading different texts about a similar unit or topic or essential question, but are we making the connection between them and helping the students build their knowledge around that topic? And then obviously using different strategies to activate knowledge and curiosity, using resources to organize our learning and our thinking. And I'll show you examples of this in a minute. And then tons and tons and tons of oral conversation. Going to be really critical. And then obviously wide reading and exposure to different topics are all ways that we can build it. So let's look at what this might look like. One activity is just starting with a unit opener. I think the unit openers are either any of our instructional materials that we use, but they are a fabulous place to activate and connect our prior knowledge. And so these are already right there in our materials, and they usually give us conversation questions for our students to talk about, right? So this is a unit on animals. So just getting them to talk about what animals do you know about, what do they like, how would you describe them? There's lots of different questions that we can use. And then here's another one. using one on animal adaptations. So just getting them to talk about it or notice, something about the animals, but using images and just getting conversation started about a topic is a really, really great strategy we can use to activate or build prior knowledge. Again, it can be done in terms of an activity with the kids. So you can ask a question that you're going to be studying. So we're going to read a story that's about courage before you read the book, and don't tell them about the story or don't tell them any of that, but just get them to talk about what is courage, what does that mean, what are some examples of that. That can be done lots of different ways. Here's one that's obviously done in a group on chart paper. So none of these have to be complicated, but this is a great way to get activate their prior knowledge about a concept that you're going to be reading or study or writing about. Spending time on the essential question that you're focusing on in that particular unit of instruction, but not just once, talking about it every single day is going to help them build knowledge around that. You can even do inquiry walls. I think I have pictures of that coming up. Where we're talking about examples of that with our students and building it. Another way you do it, I love doing the ABC knowledge, or what do we know about it? So you just give them a simple ABC chart and they have to come up with a fact or a piece of information that starts with each letter of the alphabet about the topic. And of course they can work together, because that's a great way to get them to not just use their knowledge, but their classmates' knowledge, kind of learning together. So they can kind of try to fill that in. Obviously some of the letters are always a challenge, but it's just a fun way to get kids talking, interacting, and thinking about what is it that they actually know about the topic that you're going to be using. Another way you can do this is also with an image. So give them an image and then they have to write on it or talk about it, or, different activities you can do with it, but getting them to say, what do I already know about this? So these are just ways to get their brains activated and learning and thinking about what they know. I also love the see, wonder, think strategy. So we'll actually stop and do this one. Again, I just used an image from one of our instructional programs. I want you guys to think about 3 things that you see in the picture. So what are 3 things you see in the picture? So you can unmute or add to the chat. What are some 3 things that you see or notice? So bee, flowers, words.
Multiple bees.
Yeah, there you go. In the picture, I see a flower, bee, the sky.
Sky. Oh, yeah.
Nice. So
See the
now,
color green?
you see the green? Great.
The color
Red and
green,
yellow?
yeah. Yellow, yeah.
Excellent. So we know all sorts of things about that picture. So what are 2 things you are wondering about this picture now? I wonder. What are 2 things you're wondering? You wonder about bees and the flowers. That's great. Why is the flower yellow in the center? I wonder that too. That's a great question.
Mhm.
I wonder what the
I
bee
wonder
is
what the bee
doing
is
on the
doing.
flower. That's great. How heavy is the bee? Yeah, how does it not break the flower, right? That's a great question. I wonder if there are other bees around this one. You ask that because they kind of live in groups, right, in the beehive. Oh, is the bee a boy or a girl? That's a great question. I wonder what the bee is doing and how long he'll stay on the flower. I wonder if the bee is in California or somewhere else. These are great questions. Wow, this is a curious group. Now, what's one thing you think? So I think this unit is going to be about. So what do you think we're going to study in this unit? What season is it? We think it's going to be about nature. I think we'll learn about animals. I think the unit is going to be about bees and what they like to eat. Animals, about how animals help us, different types of animals and what they can do. Well, I can't wait to find out how animals interact in the world. I think it's about springtime. Well, are we ready to find out, everyone? So you guys are great. Thank you so much. But this is just, animals versus bugs. These are fabulous. So it's really, the purpose is getting them to think about what is it that we already know? What are we connecting with? It's about activating and engaging the brain and hopefully getting really excited about learning about it. And because the brain has to be activated and ready to learn, And then we have to connect with what they know, and that's how we get learning. So we can do I think, I wonder. Here's more examples. So I just, use simple images we already have in our instructional materials, but you can do it with lots of other different ways. So another strategy which we used last time, I was getting ahead here, is anticipation guides, where you just ask them some questions, right? And what do you think right now before we learn anything? Do you think that's true, or do you think that's false? And then you come back to it at the end and you say, wow, were we right? Did we know? What did we learn? So that's another fun way to do this. Another strategy that we can use is something called the directed reading thinking activity, called DRTA. And a little bit later, I'll model this. But basically what you do in this activity is you kind of activate prior knowledge, and then you ask students to make a prediction, and then they have to support why they made that prediction. And then we read, and then we confirm or reject our prediction, and then we keep going in a cycle. So you basically, before you're reading, I'm gonna go to this slide, you say, here's a prediction. So let's go back to that bee picture. You guys made some predictions. So, but what you would add in this activity is a rationale. So I think this is going to be about animals because the title, let me go back to the slide, says animal discoveries. I think this is going to be about bees because there's a bee in the picture. I think it's going to be about springtime because there's flowers in it and flowers bloom in the springtime. So it's really about getting them to rationalize and explain their prediction and what background knowledge they're connecting to. And then we read the text, and then we confirm, well, was that a correct prediction or was that not a correct prediction? And yes or no, and then any evidence that we have about that. A little bit later, if you want to, I'll model that for you. But that's one of my very favorite strategies. And so here's a picture of it being used in a classroom. And basically, here are some reasons kind of why we make some of those predictions. And then here's some more pictures of them. So you can do, I wonder, I feel, I predict, I imagine. Those are some nice language frames that we can use with our students. Another way that we can continue to build prior knowledge or background knowledge is to use schema maps. And again, this can be done on paper. This can be on a wall in your classroom, chart paper, however you want to do that. But basically you have a topic in the middle, and then so you start off with generating what we already know about the topic. And then as we're learning about the topic, we add any new learning that we have, and then anything that was a misconception. We thought this before, but here's what our new learning or our new thinking is. And again, keep bringing that back to our students over time. And these are all activities that can be done in 2 minutes. None of them take very long, but it's that intentionality of thinking about what they know, building upon what they know, adding to it, making connections. So here's an example of one that's about sharks. So what did we know right here? What was our schema? And then what did we learn by reading that text about it? And this is what we were wrong about. So what were some of our misconceptions? And so I think this is a great way of thinking about it. And then obviously we have the classic KWL. I just thought this was a cute one, and bringing it back. My problem is I always forget to do the L. I don't know about you guys, but I always forget to come back. So the L is probably the most important part, but we can certainly do this to activate our prior knowledge. And then obviously adding it over time. So it's not just activating prior knowledge, but it's building knowledge. And so that has to be done over time. As we study a unit. Another way that we can really work on prior knowledge and background knowledge is just modeling it with our students and talking about our prior knowledge. So if I'm going to read this passage on Thoreau, I might say, and I might think aloud with them, the text says he stared at the page, all that he had written. I know how it feels to try to write something, but I have no words on my paper. So that's about connecting them to the experience that the character is having, and kind of using this phrase, such noise. And so I can just say, I know that what that experience is. So it's always about helping them connect to what they know or what their connections are with the text. If we do this in our think alouds with our learners, then that's going to help them with inferences when we get to that, because inferences require them to use background knowledge. And then here's some of my favorite questions that I use when reading text with students, that just they're kind of prompts to get them to make connections or think about what they already know as they're reading. And again, that's critical for inferences, which we'll talk about at a later session. But kind of asking, like, have you ever done something like this? Or do you have any experience with this? Or what do you already know about this topic? Or, what does it remind you of? So using different type of prompts as we read can be really helpful to actually help students continually go back to the background knowledge that they do have. And I just wanted to point out that in both Benchmark Advanced and in Wonders, they do have these indicators that talk about complex text, and they usually give you tips on what background knowledge or prior knowledge that you might want to connect with or build with your students. And then I wanted to give you a couple planning questions. So whenever I think about the reading rope of background knowledge, I always want to ask myself these questions. So for students to be successful with this text or this activity or this unit, what background knowledge will they need? But also, what do they have? What schema do they have? What can I build with them? What can I connect with them? And then how will that's when I began a unit or began a text, but then how will I continue to develop their knowledge around that topic?